Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the football betting series here on YouTube, UEFA edition. I'm not going to lie, it's been a bit of a rough journey in UEFA contests. Our overall record standing at 8 wins, 4 losses, and 0 pushes for a pretty poor profit of just £1.50. Now we're in the quarterfinal stages. The intensity of the competition is going to ramp up, and hopefully our profits will too. I've got a number of selections across the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start things off in the Champions League on the Tuesday night as Arsenal play host to Bayern Munich. And Arsenal needed penalties to overcome Porto in their round of 16 encounter. After a pretty poor showing in Portugal, Arsenal really played well in the second leg and perhaps could have even won the tie outright within the 90 minutes. However, credit goes to Porto for making the Gunners earn it. As with Arsenal before them, Bayern Munich also overcame a deficit in the first leg. They overturned their 1-0 loss to Lazio by winning 3-0 in Germany. Now, the Bavarians have struggled to maintain their high standards this season, both domestically, as it looks like they won't win the Bundesliga, but also on the continent, as they have only managed 3 clean sheets in their 8 Champions League matches. When we look at the head to head record, there's not really much to read into here. The last competitive match between these two sides was 7 years ago, and aside from Manuel Neuer, Thomas Muller, and Kingsley Coman, both sides are completely different, so it's really difficult to make any judgments based on previous results. As much as Arsenal have improved this season and Bayern being on the decline, I'm really buying into the European pedigree argument here. Arsenal and most of their team are largely inexperienced at the later stage of European competitions, and I think will struggle under the pressure. Both Arsenal and Bayern Munich have struggled in their first leg ties, so I'm going to be laying Arsenal in the first leg here. I don't really think that Bayern can afford to lose this game, and with the Bundesliga all but out of reach, this seems like their best last hope to redeem their season. If Bayern Munich plays smart and get some experienced heads in the lineup, I think they can get a positive result in the first leg. Now, it's a really flowery argument without a lot of statistical backing for me, so I think a half stake is the most sensible thing here. I also wouldn't necessarily advise the audience also backing this unless you also buy into the European experience argument too. So, a half stake in bet number one, laying Arsenal in the first leg. Sticking with the Champions League, our second selection sees Real Madrid play host to Manchester City. And Los Blancos, they beat Red Bull Leipzig in the previous round by 2 goals to 1 on aggregate after a draw in Madrid. After a draw in Madrid, they managed to pick up a win in Germany in a game where they were, well, frankly, fortunate to maintain their clean sheet. Man City, on the other hand, they eased past Copenhagen, winning both legs by 3 goals to 1 for a total aggregate score of 6-2. Now, Man City's reputation as a goal machine has once again been upheld this season, but they have struggled defensively. To this point in the contest, they've conceded 9 goals, which is almost double what they allowed in last year's tournament, only allowing 5 on their path to pick up the Champions League trophy. Head to head, these sides have seen a few run ins over the past couple of years. The 6 games between 2020 and 2023 saw 4 Manchester City wins, 1 draw, and 1 Real Madrid win. So there's a pretty decent argument leaning towards a Man City win, or even laying Real Madrid. However, I'm going to go with a different selection. In 5 of the last 6 head-to-head games, both teams to score has come in, and this plays on City and Real Madrid's ability to score a high volume of goals, but respects their defence a little less. Both Real Madrid and Man City have seen both teams scoring in 5 of their 8 Champions League games already, and both of them sit amongst the highest scorers in the division. Real Madrid's 18 goals and Man City's 24 goals ranks these sides the number 3 and number 1 top goal scorers in the competition, respectively. So for me, both teams to score is the bet, and I'm going to be backing that for a full stake. Moving on to Thursday nights now in the Europa League, Leverkusen play host to West Ham. And by Leverkusen, they managed to squeak past Karabag in the previous round. They came back from a 2-0 deficit in the first leg to steal the draw there. And then, if that was not dramatic enough, Leverkusen scored 2 stoppage time goals to win the second leg outright 3-2 for an aggregate score of 5-4. Given the high volume of goals there, it might not surprise anyone to know that Leverkusen are second highest goal scorers in the contest, with 24 in their 8 games, for an average of exactly 3 goals scored per game. The away side, West Ham, they lost their first leg 1 goal to 0 in Germany before beating Freiburg 5-0 in London for a 5-1 victory, cruising on into this quarter-final tie. The Hammers have scored 15 goals in their 8 Europa League games, or an average of 1.88 goals per game, And they are also the proud owners of the best defensive record in the contest. They've conceded the fewest amount of goals compared to anyone else at this stage in the competition, only allowing 5 goals in their 8 games. Now, I like Leverkusen for this game, but I'm not too sure if they're going to be able to hold up defensively, as they did struggle against Karabag in both legs. But I can absolutely see them overpowering and outscoring West Ham. I'm thinking it could be 2-1 or 3-1 in Germany, but they may need both legs to get the job done here. That's why I'm going to be taking Bayer Leverkusen to qualify for the next round for a full stake in bet number 3. Our fourth and final selection in today's episode also features on the Thursday night in the Conference League as Victoria Pilsen play host to Fiorentina. Now, Victoria's previous games were, well, really quite boring. Both games against Servette finished 0-0, and that's 180 minutes of normal time and 30 minutes of extra time with 0 goals scored. They only found the back of the net thanks to the penalty shootout, in which they did win to find themselves in the quarter-final. Victoria don't score goals as a rule. They've only scored 9 in their 8 Yukon games so far, which is not ideal. However, they have only conceded once in these 8 games, which is the best defensive record not only in the Yukon, but in all 3 major European contests. Now, whilst that is an insane record to hold, I'm going to be slightly negative here. They've only played Servette in the round of 16, and their group stage games against Dinamo, Balkani, and Astana, well, that level of competition is nowhere close to Fiorentina. Speaking of Fiorentina, they beat Maccabi Haifa by 5 goals to 4 over their 2 legs in the previous round. Looking at the stats, I'd advocate for perhaps a new goalkeeper, as Maccabi scored 4 goals with their 6 shots on target across both legs. And that poor goalkeeper performance really did add a bit more respect to the scoreline than perhaps Haifa earned through the quality of their play. Going the other way, Fiorentina have scored 19 goals in their 8 games in the Yukon, or an average of 2.38 scored per game, which is a respectable record for sure. And that's why I'm going to be backing them to qualify in this bet. Based on the disaster they had in the previous round, I'm going to struggle to back them to win the first leg in 90 minutes away from home. But I do, however, have a lot more confidence that they'll be able to pull off the result in the tie overall. I'm going to be using a full stake to back them to qualify in the final bet of today's episode.